The growing interest among scholars to see stronger interdisciplinary research between the disciplines of human performance technology and instructional design. I believe Merrill's first principles of instruction, a very prominent design model used by many online educators, may be the catalyst that can bring forth this convergence between human performance technology and instructional design. In fact, a closer look at human performance technology and Merrill's model revealed there are many commonalities between the two. And these commonalities can build the platform upon which human performance technologists and instructional designers can collaborate together and to come up with innovative ways for enhancing human performance, ways that draws from different perspectives and different traditions. Hi, my name is Jacob Lee, and today I want to discuss the notable commonalities between human performance technology, or HPT, and Merrill's first principles of instruction, or MFPI. My presentation is divided into 4 parts. In the first section, I will give a brief description of human performance technology, and I'll suggest that although different scholars have defined human performance technology differently, there appears to be some consistent elements across all the definitions. In the second part, I will provide an overview of Merrill's first principles of instruction, which is a prominent 4-phase cyclical instructional design model, one that is triggered by a problem. In the third section, I will highlight the many similarities between Merrill's first principles of instruction and human performance technology. And I'm going to suggest MFPI may be a suitable candidate for bridging the disciplines of human performance improvement and instructional design. And in the fourth and final section, I'm going to discuss the growing interests among scholars to see stronger collaboration and interdisciplinary research between HPT and instructional design. And I'll conclude that MFPI may be a good catalyst to bring forth a convergence between HPT and instructional design. Let me begin by talking a little bit about human performance technology. Now, human performance technology emerged as a formal discipline in the late 1970s, largely triggered by the writings of Thomas Gilbert, who is often referred to as the father of human performance technology. Yet almost 5 decades later, HPT scholars continue to search for a clear purpose and a unified definition. Indeed, as Urbach suggested, HPT is a field of study that continues to evolve. Kahn and Molenda, in their recent compilation and thorough analysis of 31 definitions of HPT, have shown that there remain many inconsistencies as to how people view HPT. And similar to Urbach, Kahn and Molenda concluded that HPT continues to be a highly interdisciplinary phenomena in its early stages of development, and it's still in search of a clear definition. Now, despite the many variations in how people have defined HPT, there appears to be some consistent elements across all the definitions, and they suggest that there are indeed core elements that HPT scholars have agreed upon. For instance, HPT professionals agreed that the ultimate purpose of HPT is to help people, organizations, and societies at large to become better performers. That is, be more effective and productive in fulfilling their roles and carrying out their worthy and ethical goals. Second, they agreed that HPT focuses mainly on the final performance outcomes rather than just the training interventions, although they would acknowledge that sometimes training may be needed to reach the desirable result. In fact, according to some scholars, HPT is generally biased against training. This is so because training often incurs a great deal of cost, takes a great deal of time to prepare, and yet it still struggles with this issue of transfer of learning back to the workplace. Third, professionals have agreed that HPT achieves its purpose by removing deficiencies, where deficiencies refer to the gaps between the current state and the desired state. Fourth, HPT professionals all acknowledge that closing performance gaps require comprehensive and systemic study of the problem. And this means the problem must be analyzed in their entirety, taking into careful considerations the integrated parts within the subsystem, as well as their connections with other subsystems, as well as the suprasystem. And as O'Driscoll suggested, the analysis must be grounded in science and best empirical evidence available. Fifth, professionals agreed that HPT is systematic in that it follows a predetermined and relatively linear set of steps, which starts from front-end performance analysis, to cause analysis, to selection of interventions and design, to implementation and change management, and finally to evaluation of result. Now these steps are iterative, methodical, and perpetual. And this systematic and cyclical approach is what cultivates within an organization a mindset, a natural mindset for continuous improvement. Finally, professionals agreed that HPT entails coming up with and applying a broad array of practical and ethical solutions that may or may not require training. Now, based on the above elements that are shared by scholars, Kahn and Melinda came up with a definition that they believe would synthesize the contributions made by other HPT scholars and would encapsulate the essence of what human performance technology is all about. According to Kahn and Melinda, human performance technology is a field committed to helping people and the organizations where they become more productive through the study and ethical practice of systemic, and evidence-based methodology of identifying performance deficiencies and opportunities, designing and developing cost-effective and ethical solutions, implementing them, and determining their worth, thereby enhancing the success of individuals, teams, and organizations, and thus the well-being of society. Now, let me talk a little bit about Merrill's first principles of instruction, or more simply, MFPI. MFPI is actually one of the most widely used instructional design models by online professionals. For example, Kim and his team applied MFPI to increase student engagement in a flipped classroom, especially through the use of problem-centered instructional activities. Similarly, Frick and his team showed that when MFPI was applied in the redesign of a massive open online course, students were 4 times more likely to pass the subsequent certification tests when compared to those who took a similar massive open online course that didn't have MFPI attributes. Yogansi applied MFPI in the design of a math course across 3 different settings: face-to-face, purely web-based, as well as blended learning. And based on his research results, Yogansi concluded that MFPI can help students achieve higher self-regulation, self-efficacy, as well as academic result. Trong and his team in their research have shown that MFPI can increase overall instructional quality and is applicable across a variety of settings, including the workplace or formal academic classrooms. And it is suitable for different physical and virtual platforms. Finally, Simamata and her team use MFPI to design blended learning that can be catered to learners' needs, preferences, and styles. Now, Merrill developed the MFPI model after reviewing some of the most prominent instructional design models and theories available at the time. For instance, he looked at the 4MAT model by McCarthy. He also looked at the Star Legacy model by the Vanderbilt Learning Center and several others. And what Merrill observed was that in all the different theories and instructional design models, there were 5 underlying principles that were common. And he believed these principles are necessary for effective and efficient instruction. Now, Merrill defined principle as a relationship that is always true under appropriate conditions, regardless of program or practice. The first principle Merrill identified is that learning is promoted when learners are engaged in solving real-world problems. In other words, problem-centered. For Merrill, a problem may include a wide range of activities that a learner could face in the real world, and each activity should involve learning the whole task and not just components of the task. The second principle is that learning is promoted when relevant previous experience is activated, or activation. The assumption is that in most cases, learners approach the problem with some prior and relevant knowledge and skills that would contribute to the new learning. And therefore, an educator's job should be to help learners recall, relate, describe, or apply knowledge from relevant past experience that can be used as a foundation for the new knowledge. And in the event learners are completely new to the subject and therefore have no prior relevant experience to draw from, the educator must then teach foundational knowledge. The third principle is that learning is promoted when the instruction actually demonstrates what is to be learned rather than just telling information about what is to be learned. He calls that demonstration. This may involve giving examples and non-examples of concepts, visualizations for process, or modeling of desirable behaviors using multiple means and media. And the demonstration phase is also a time for educators to give proper guidance, such as pointing learners to relevant information and exposing them to different viewpoints so to broaden their perspective. The fourth principle is that learning is promoted when learners are required to use the new knowledge or skills to solve problems. He called that application. The goal of this phase is to have learners practice applying the new knowledge or skills consistently, and even as coaching from the educator gradually diminishes. So through the repeated application under varied problem scenarios and through receiving appropriate feedback from the educator, learners will develop important skills in error detection and also correction. Finally, the fifth principle is that learner is promoted when learners are encouraged to integrate or transfer the new knowledge or skills into their daily living, and he called that integration. This means learners should be able to create, invent, even explore new and personal ways to use the new knowledge and skills. Now, one important note to make about Merrill's model is that essentially it is a 4-phase cycle, and this cycle is triggered by a real-world problem. In other words, it is the problem that initiates the 4th phase of instruction, which moves from activation to demonstration to application and finally to integration. And Merrill claimed that what made his model different from the other instructional design models at the time was that it is very much problem-centered instead of topic or subject-centered. And as well, the individual instructional components are taught in the context of a progression of real-world problems where the student is shown a problem, then taught the components, and shown how the components are used to solve that real-world problem and to complete the entire task. So far, I've given you a brief description of human performance technology as well as Merrill's first principles of instruction. Now allow me to point out some of the notable commonalities between the two. Currently, there are no published research that specifically talks about how HPT is applied in MFPI or vice versa. For the most part, the two have remained in two very separate worlds, one belonging to human performance improvement and the other one belonging to instructional design. Yet scholars have suggested there needs to be stronger collaboration between the two worlds, given that they have similar interests and certainly shared focus, namely to enhance human performance through learning, through continuous improvement, and through innovation. And indeed, there are clearly advantages in studying HPT in conjunction with its neighboring fields, like instructional design, since this would create opportunities for cross-pollination of ideas as well as to identify areas of convergence in thinking that could lead to synergy. So by adopting a more ontological and syncretic approach, one that gleans on insights from different disciplines, scholars can derive at a more coherent and complete theory of human performance, one that incorporates useful contributions from both human performance technology and instructional design. In fact, I believe MFPI may be one of the best candidates to bring about this convergence between HPT and instructional design. In a recent survey involving 199 instructional design and HPT professionals, the survey revealed that MFPI is one of the most notable models that are used by both HPT and instructional design professionals. And this should not be surprising, given the notable similarities between HPT and MFPI. First, it is clear that both HPT and MFPI are problem-focused and concentrate on real-world issues. Now, admittedly, HPT defines problems more broadly to include anything, and that is both training and non-training issues that could cause deficiency. MFPI, on the other hand, mainly focuses on problems that originate from the performance, lack of knowledge, or skills. Yet both HPT and MFPI share the goal of resolving real-life problems by closing gaps. And as I noted earlier, one of the distinctives of MFPI is its fixation on solving real-world problems instead of merely imparting knowledge and skills. In fact, Merrill would often share that it is the problem that acts as the pebble in the pond which starts the ripples, resulting in the formulation of solution to bring about meaningful change. Second, it seems clear that both HPT and MFPI are systematic, linear, yet cyclical in nature, such that the output for one phase becomes the input for the subsequent phase. For example, in MFPI, the output from application becomes the input for integration. And in the case of HPT, the output from intervention selection and design becomes the input for intervention implementation and change management. And as well, both models revolve around and maintain focus on the specific problem throughout the entire process. And in both cases, the cycle perpetuates until the problem is finally resolved. Third, both HPT and MFPI are holistic and systemic in nature. As mentioned earlier, Merrill emphasized in his model the importance of showing the learner the whole problem or the whole task, not just the individual parts. He always acknowledged the need for integrated solution to a complex problem. Merrill's perspective is really the same as those shared by HPT professionals, that attention should be given to the entire system, which is comprised of subsystems with individual connected parts. A notable difference, however, is that for MFPI, the system includes mainly elements that are related to knowledge and skills. For HPT, the system can be much broader and can encompass environmental factors as well as non-training related individual factors. Fourth, it can be observed that both HPT and MFPI emphasize on the importance of drawing from what is already known so to define what further improvements are needed to reach the ideal. That is, to clarify the gap. Now, in the case of MFPI, the main purpose of the first phase, that is activation, is to draw from the performer's prior experience and then to determine what further knowledge and skills are needed to resolve the performance gap, as deemed necessary by the subject matter experts. Similarly, HPT also values drawing from what is already known collectively and looks at best practices within the field of discipline. For instance, several HPT scholars have highlighted the benefits of studying best practices, especially by doing thorough literature review to bring about positive changes to higher education programs. Finally, both HPT and MFPI are action-oriented in that the end goal is to bring about meaningful changes in the society instead of merely increasing the head knowledge of the performers. And as I described earlier, the last phase of MFPI, integration, is really about applying what was learned not just within the training setting, but more importantly, applying it in the real world. Similarly, a key facet of HPT is to help people, organizations, and societies at large be more effective and productive in fulfilling worthy and ethical goals. And this demands practical, relevant, and meaningful application of right solutions. Solutions that may or may not involve training. Now, as I shared several times in this presentation, there are definitely growing interest among scholars to see stronger interdisciplinary research, stronger collaboration between HPT and instructional design professionals. And MFPI may very well be the catalyst that can bring about this convergence. Admittedly, this can only happen if researchers are willing to tear down the unnecessary silos that have separated these fields. Silos that were forged by different traditions, language, even research biases. Yet, stronger collaboration does make sense, especially as the world of human performance, one that is built on collective understanding of human behavior, becomes increasingly complex. Therefore, there is a practical need to investigate learning, development, and innovation using mixed research methods from diverse perspectives, drawing from different theoretical models. While it remains uncertain how the disciplines of HPT and instructional design will eventually converge, it seems likely that this convergence will happen as instructional design professionals intentionally expand their front-end analysis or needs assessment to include and to explore beyond just knowledge and skill gaps and incorporate HPT principles in their investigations. Principles that would steer them away from making training as the default solution for all problems. In fact, there's evidence of this happening already. For instance, some graduate-level instructional design programs, like the one offered at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, now require students to apply HPT, to study HPT as part of their core curriculum. As well, writers of instructional design books, like the ones by Larson and Lockheed, or Rothwell and Kazanis, they have visibly expanded their discussions on needs assessment, needs analysis, to include environmental factors, organizational factors, factors that previous instructional design books have largely overlooked. And these are all positive signs of convergence between the two worlds. And in addition, instructional design models that emphasize on resolving problems rather than just prescribing training, such as MFPI, will likely serve as natural catalysts for further discussion and collaboration between HPT and instructional design professionals. Since these instructional models are already philosophically aligned with HPT principles in that they are less biased towards training and more willing to look beyond just performers' knowledge and skill gaps. So just to recap then, in this presentation, I've highlighted some of the notable commonalities between Merrill's first principles of instruction and human performance technology. First, I identified several consistent elements shared by various definitions of HPT. And based on these elements, I presented a definition based on Kahn and Melendez's research. Second, I provided an overview of MFPI and explained that it is a four-phase cyclical instructional design model that revolves around a central problem, a problem that demands resolution. Third, I identified many similarities between MFPI and HPT, even though the two models reside in two very separate disciplines, that of instructional design and of human performance improvement. Given these similarities, I suggested that MFPI may be a suitable candidate for bridging between the two disciplines of human performance technology and instructional design. Indeed, there are growing interests among scholars to see stronger collaboration, more interdisciplinary research between HPT and instructional design. And this makes a lot of sense, given that human performance and human behavior is incredibly complex. And therefore, to come up with innovative solutions, we must draw from different disciplines, to learn from different traditions, to think through the different theoretical model, so to come up with the most desirable solutions for enhancing human performance.